His possible attempt to go straight in shambles, Hoch returns to Chicago, where he courts two women, one of whom will help to prove his undoing. This is Tomb Snoopers. All right, who you gonna call? Tomb Snoopers.
Tomb Snoopers. I love
All
that.
right, so it's Drew. We might as well just go ahead and cover what a weird time it is in Chicago right now as we're recording these things.
Oh yeah, I guess
It's very strange
it
days.
feels very disjointed.
Yeah, there's been a couple of previous ones where I felt like we were being obtuse about what was going on and why we were drinking so much while we were recording. It didn't come out as bad as I was afraid it might have.
Oh no!
Later when I listened to it, I was thinking, oh man, we might have to redo this one. Like
Right.
after I finished, then I was no, it was fine.
Oh, yeah.
I won't tell you which one it was exactly.
That's right. Name the bourbon episode.
Yeah. So we've both been out doing patrols and protesting and stuff while we watch stormtroopers in the city grabbing people off of the street without a warrant.
Yeah, today was definitely my weirdest day. Have you had any direct encounters?
No, I have not.
No. Today, so I drove out to the detention center, and I got caught up in between some of the ICE cars, right? So I was just like, and then you have that moment of like drive casually. I mean, like, not for nothing.
Hands at 10 and 2.
Yeah, I mean, not for nothing. I fit some of the profile elements, and so
yeah, the fact that you're a born U.S. citizen doesn't really seem to matter to them.
No.
I mean, it means they'll let you go eventually after
Yeah.
zip tying you and hauling you in the back of a truck for a while.
Yeah, there's a video of a woman. She was at a parking lot, and they just walked, or they drove up on her while she was just getting out of her car.
Yeah.
And her only thing, it was just because didn't even have a Latino, like a Spanish accent.
Yeah.
But she was dark haired, darker skinned, and they were asking her questions like, "Where were you born?" And
Yeah.
stuff like that. So. Yeah.
Well, it ties into history stuff because it's easy enough to think of parallels. You have like the Pullman riots when the president sent in the troops to break up the strikers in 1894. One case I've been working on lately, trying to really get my head about what went on, is right after Lincoln was inaugurated, he appointed this guy J.R. Jones as the new United States Marshal here. And like his first week on the job, he was an anti-slavery guy, but somebody came at him and said, "I've got a warrant that you need to execute for people who've run away from me." And further told him that if you don't have them arrested, you are personally liable for all of the money that they are worth.
Jeez.
So he arranged as quietly as he could to get them. He later said he felt terrible about it. But once the news got out, there apparently hadn't been a fugitive slave arrested in Chicago in 8 years at that point. That's what the abolitionists in town were saying. It seems unlikely, but certainly they'd done a very good job of having it being very difficult to get a warrant for something like that in Chicago. They had to go to Springfield to get this warrant. But then immediately LCP Freer, one of the big abolitionists in town, put out an ad in the paper saying the new United States Marshal is igniting a reign of terror against our colored population. Do you wish to do something? Meet at my office. None but live men are invited.
Oh.
And so they formed the Vigilance Committee. And that's, most of the people on it are people who were known for their abolitionist work in town. But I just found out today, standing at J.R. Jones's grave, you can see LCP Freer's like 15, 20 feet away. It's right there. It's like he's still keeping an eye on him. And Jones eventually acquitted himself. He was new on the job. He thought that he had to do it, even though he hated doing it. And he remained at the post for a long time without any further incident. He never tried that again. Ended up working for General Grant and becoming Minister to Belgium under Grant eventually. So he seems to have acquitted himself, but it was just quite a scare at the time, and everybody was kind of on edge that they were going to get picked up.
Right.
As in general in Chicago, well, James H. Collins, one of Freer's law partners, a few years before, there had been a case where Henry Rhines, the Chicago cop who seemed to act like finding people escaping slavery was his whole job, and later killed a bartender and somehow got pardoned, also at Graceland Cemetery.
Wow.
He had arrested a few people. Collins and Freer, with help from several other people present, were able to help the guys escape while convincing a judge that they didn't actually have the authority to make this arrest. Next day, Collins is in the paper saying, if you ever see a Chicago police officer arresting someone escaping from slavery, it's okay to shoot that police officer.
Oh.
Because all they're doing is kidnapping. They don't have the right to make that kind of thing.
Sounds so
yeah, it sounds so familiar. I'm not sure you'd actually get away with shooting that police officer in court, but Collins probably would have defended you.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing we're going through right now. Is it like
what's going on is how do we know they're not just kidnapping somebody?
Correct.
There's nothing that to differentiate it to, except that human traffickers, I think, are generally more subtle about this kind of thing.
A little bit.
So that's where we stand in the city, and but with the history stuff, that's what I do with the Johann Hoch thing too. Sorry we got this distracted off of things. I just want people to know, listening, kind of what we're dealing with in Chicago right now. I'm out with my whistle and my neighbors with their whistles, just to summon a crowd and warn people to hide if anybody shows up at school drop-off and dismissal times. It's an interesting way to meet the neighbors.
It is, and you are in an area that was hit hard on Tuesday of this week, which would have been October 21st, and for those, I hope it's okay that I put a timestamp on it, but there was heavy activity on the north side going after people who were, like, they have images of just landscaping tools left behind because they were, like, and today it's construction sites in Lincoln Park. And,
they tear gassed Wrigleyville today.
Oh my God.
And, for the most part, life in the city goes on, but
it's weird. It's so surreal.
Life in the city goes on, but you got to watch out for this kind of thing happening now. I got to ramble about how much this reminds me of the song Desolation Row for a very long time, with all the good parts and all of the bad parts. But we got to get back to the gaggle of grotesques.
This will be the moment in history for some other historian to look back on. When
and like how we had to compartmentalize and look at this long history we have of corrupt cops in Chicago, which we're just about to get to pretty soon.
Oh boy!
But really, what we've got here is tying into Pullman when Hoch was done murdering Mary Becker back in St. Louis. He came back to Chicago and got a job in the Pullman area. He's usually said to be in the Pullman shops. It was probably around there. And he was boarding with a family there. This is one that I really had to go digging to find what the address was or where the address came from. It was in a Chicago Evening American article, which generally we consider those. That was the Hearst paper. We always want to bash them as being an unreliable source. So they give you a specific address. That didn't come out of nowhere.
Right.
And it's confirmed a couple other places because they gave the name of the family Hoch was boarding with, and I was able to look up later. They spelled it wrong, but that was the family at this place on what is now South St. Lawrence. It was Watt then, and it's a townhouse that is still standing. It's right across from the Hotel Florence, which was the big centerpiece of the town of Pullman, named after Mr. Pullman's daughter. And this would have all been just about 10 years after the strikes, when old man Pullman cut everybody's salary by a third but didn't lower the rents he was charging them, and led to people sending in the troops. But he was just back in the shops now, boarding with a family that thought he was just the best guy. And it's the strangest thing is early on when I was doing Mysterious Chicago virtual tours, it was kind of a running joke. We blamed everything that went wrong, every technical hiccup, we would blame the ghost of Pullman, because it seemed like every time I went down to Pullman, I would lose a phone case or something would break in my car or something weird happened every time. And now I realize when I look back at the film footage shot there, you can see my car is parked right outside of Johann Hoch's house. Oh. Something I had no idea of at the time. So, one of those interesting little coincidences. Yeah. But while he was there, he was simultaneously courting two women. One was a woman named Minnie Podolsky, and we can write down, he told her that he was born in, the scan of the paper is not quite good enough to make out, but he was born in Germany. He was 43 years old. He had a wife and 3 children, but a boy had been killed by a streetcar on Larrabee Street a couple years before. Wife died of grief the same year. Other children died the same year. Whole family cremated at Graceland Cemetery. And had to go to Germany on account of his father's illness and showed a cablegram saying, my father is sick and he's dying, we're going to get all his money. But this was this all came out in a series of letters that he wrote to this woman named Minnie Podolsky, and he thought that she had money. But at some point in the courtship, he found out that she did not.
Uh-oh.
And at that point, she got a letter saying, "Look out for this guy." It says he was a tyrant to his deceased wife. He was a Lutheran and she was a Catholic. And as a Catholic Christian, I say to you, I have seen and spoken to you often in St. Michael's Church, where we lived before we moved to Pullman. His wife complained to me that he didn't speak for weeks. He would not tolerate a Catholic priest in the house, nor would he permit his child to be baptized a Catholic. His oldest son was run over by the streetcar, and he reproved his wife severely, saying it was her faults. She often saw the boy run across the tracks and never reproved him, and she grieved herself to death. This all lines up. She figured out pretty quickly that Hoch had probably written that letter himself. Like, sent her this nasty letter saying, don't marry this guy.
Way.
Because he realized that she didn't have any money and wanted to get out of it. So she wrote him another letter saying, do not fear, I am going to follow you to keep you from marrying. A devil like you I do not marry. I have had 3 days to look for information and have convinced myself that you are not good enough even for the gallows. I will not soil myself with you any longer. And then she demanded $100 for all the time that he had wasted. And he wrote her back this nice thing saying, thank you for your loving letter. It was forwarded to me. And
oh my God. It's weird levels of brilliance.
Yeah, this was a trick that he had tried a few times before, I think, is when something wasn't working out, he would write nasty letters about himself.
He would tell the truth about himself.
Yeah, just telling the truth. I mean, it wasn't truth that he was...
Right, but
that he was a Lutheran, or that the kids had been run over or anything like that. So this was something, but she saved all of these letters so they could eventually be published in the Chicago American. She would give them over to Evelyn Campbell, a reporter that we'll talk about later, that I love talking about, so I can't wait to say more. Now, at the same time he was courting her, he was also courting a woman named Anna Hendricks. And she's kind of a mystery character to me because I don't know where she ended up.
Oh, boy.
And she lived. She would end up being a really central figure in the case and was able to tell her story in much more fluently than others. I think she was actually born in the States. Most of his wives were born in what is now Germany, or areas that are now Germany. Anna... Sometimes she's listed in the press as Anna Hendricks, and sometimes it's Hendricks' son, which makes it a little bit tricky. I think it was Hendricks, based on things like gravestones. But I can't find her gravestone. I don't know whatever happened to her. But she... Oh, hey, Miles, the cat just jumped onto the table. We'll just hop him on back down.
If you jump up, you can only jump here.
Yeah.
That's it.
So... Let's see. So... Anna later said that she met him, well, she said, I met him, I am ashamed to admit, through a personal ad. She had seen his matrimonial ad, and the way she said it, she was like, well, I'll just fool with this guy a little bit.
Right.
And she thought she was catfishing him. Well, she had been married to another guy. They lived up kind of by where the jail is now, in what is now Little Village.
Oh.
Right over on the southwest side of Chicago, or like map-wise, it's the heart of Chicago. They call that neighborhood.
How did you know that?
Yeah, right around Little Village and the jail on 26th Street. She lived there. Her husband was suffering from dementia, and one day while he was out working a job, he just died of typhoid fever and was found lying in a ditch.
No.
So
that's a terrible way to
go. Terrible. It was. So that obviously would have been rough on her. There were some interesting quotes at the time. And she ended up just living by herself and decided to mess with this guy through a personal ad. But then gradually through the letters, well, what he wrote to her was almost exactly the same as what he had written to Mrs. Podolsky. He had written, I had 4 children, one died in a streetcar accident. Next year my wife died of grief, and they were all cremated at Graceland Cemetery. I will one day inherit a fortune in Germany. And she just fell in love with the guy. And again, it was a case he found out what she wanted and became that guy for a month. He became that guy. They met. They went to Hammond, Indiana to marry. He was going by his name, John Jacob Schmidt, his proper name. And said immediately, well, before they got married, he had been saying things like, I wish you didn't have any money. I don't want people to say, oh, there goes that old Schmidt chasing after old widows for their money. And then one day he asked her, does your husband have a gravestone yet? And she said, I was going to do that in the spring sometime. He said, no, it has to happen now. I don't want anyone saying that old Schmidt married that widow before her husband even had a gravestone.
Huh.
So they went out to Forest Home Cemetery, which is out in Forest Park, out in the west suburbs. And he loaned her the money to buy a gravestone. And she paid him back for it. So, but essentially he paid for the gravestone. And I was able to find it. It's just, it's a nice little round marker for Heinrich Hendricks,
okay.
or Henry Hendricks. Last time I saw it was all covered in cicadas,
oh boy.
which is very creepy.
Yeah,
But
it is.
I asked at the office if they had like a record of who might have paid for that, because they were also selling them at the time. I'm not sure if they do that anymore. They didn't have any records of it, but it's there, a gravestone that was paid for by Johann Hoch. And right after he moved into her place, they had a wedding party at the place in Pullman. Then he moved over into her place and immediately took her wash tub out and smashed it. He said, I am marrying you for a companion, not for a servant.
Oh.
And I don't ever want you to have to wash again.
It's quite the display.
Yeah, and
okay.
Of course she was charmed. Okay, we're going to have people do the washing for us now. And they had, for a couple of months, by all accounts, I think, a very happy marriage. They would go out to music halls together. In particular, there was a song they liked to do in music halls called Goodbye Dolly Gray. And there was some kind of particular wave that you did when you sang Goodbye Dolly Gray. I haven't been able to find out much about that, just she would reminisce about it. But then one day he came to her and said, I keep saying that I wish you had no money, and now I have to take all of that back because I just got word that my father has died in Germany, and we need to go to Germany to claim the inheritance. I'll need $500. And she was only too happy to loan it and go. He went to buy the tickets and everything, but then he decided he was going to go by himself. He said, it's all right, I'll be back. And he gave her the Dolly Gray wave as he walked away.
Wow.
And that was the last she ever saw of him, or last she saw him for about a year anyway, until after he was arrested. And there's some interesting things with it. She knew that she was able to be identified as one of his real wives pretty early on because she saw his shoes and said those have to be his shoes. He had like big bunions on his feet. We had to wear special shoes.
Okay.
And the cops hadn't put that in the paper, so when they said that, they knew that this was the real one.
What
And
unique detail.
Yeah. She was working kind of by where he had been living later on. But there's one other thing that really stuck out and would inspire a lot of other legends is she remembered that he had pointed out a building at 701 63rd Street and told her, I actually own that building. It's all covered in mortgages and things, but once I paid it off, that building is mine free and clear. And that building, 701 63rd, he probably knew, but it's hard to tell, but that was the old H.H. Holmes murder castle.
No.
Yeah, so the legend of that building was that it was a hotel during the World's Fair full of everything you could possibly need to kill a person. That's a little bit more fiction than facts.
Right.
But when Hoch had first come to Chicago in July of 1895, that was the big news story, that the cops were investigating this building at 701 63rd and trying to find all the bones and all the death traps and the gas chambers and not really finding much. But it became a part of the legend anyway, and apparently he was always in the habit of telling his new wives, look, I own that building, or I own that building. And in this case, for whatever reason, he showed her that one on 63rd Street.
That's morbid, and I mean, like, how much of his ideas came from sensationalization?
It could, yeah. You wonder. I mean, he had already gotten off to his start by then,
right?
But he had just murdered his first wife in the States back in West Virginia when that story went around, and taken all of her insurance money and all of her inheritance. And he must have been reading the articles like, "Hey, this guy knows a thing or two.
He's onto something."
Yeah. So, later he would say that he'd heard of Holmes the murderer, but he didn't realize he wasn't hanged in Chicago later on. Because this would come up a lot. A lot of people would start saying that he had worked for Holmes, that he had been a part of the whole crew at the castle. And because of this, a lot of the old people from that story came back and told their stories all over again. And it's fascinating to see how badly they remember it all. There's all these details that they're getting wrong. It had been 10 years. Nobody had rewritten the story or anything. It hadn't been rehashed or fresh in their memory. Right. That's always kind of fascinating to see how people's memories lapse on things like this. There could be a whole project about that, how badly people remember these things.
Well, yeah, and so much like with the passage of time and other elements and your imagination. Yeah.
And Anna would later turn up in would later be a major figure in the case, and she would remember saying things like, "Well, I was a fool and I loved him."
Oh.
And what she fantasized about now was finding him again, and she would give him the Dolly Gray wave. And he said ta-ta as he left. She said, "That's all I got for my $500. A Dolly Gray wave and a ta-ta."
Oh, boy.
Now, Anna is such an interesting case. I found one thing that I think she was born in Iowa. And she spoke German, like Hoch called her Liebchen, which meant sweetheart. But with a name like, well, sometimes she went by Anna, sometimes she went by Mary, which is the way it is with all of these people. Sometimes it's Hendrix, sometimes it's Hendrix's son. And I can find her in like the city directories. As of a year or so later, she was still living at that place over by the jail. But then she just disappears. It could be that she got married again and changed her last name. That's probably the most likely scenario. Or it could be that she just started going by a different name because people wouldn't stop bugging her about this Johann Hoch stuff after it all came out.
Yeah, it would get old, I would imagine.
I can imagine that. Yeah, it happened with a couple other people in the case, that they just started going by different names and trying to disappear into things. But this was a big one that I was going through city directories and anything that I could find, just trying to connect some other person. There were a few other people with similar names that I thought might be her for a while, but it didn't add up in the end. So most of the other people I could figure out what became of them when they died. I could find the death certificates. I could find their graves from the 1930s, 1940s, whenever it is that they passed away. In the case of Anna Hendrix, I got nothing. I'm hoping maybe somebody out there can still find it. This is all kind of a play-along game. But she goes by Mary sometimes and Anna sometimes, Hendrix sometimes and Hendrix's son sometimes, which makes it all difficult. And also, I don't think she ever had children, which also makes it trickier, as there's nobody really doing the genealogy or tending to the graves or anything. I don't think she had any real family. She was just reportedly living with friends at the time that Hoch was first arrested and trying to stay out of everybody's way. So, yeah, I went as far as going to, like, Forest Home Cemetery and saying, this should be the person who bought this plot would presumably be Anna Hendrix. Do we have anything in the records? If they did, they told me they didn't.
Okay. And I mean, like, do they have, how far back, all the way to the beginning, do they have all?
I would assume that they do. I mean, like, I know at Graceland I can find, like, that Hoch bought the plot for Julia Steinbrecher. It's got, paid for by Mr. Hoch, and we could see how much it was. And we could see that he would be the owner of that lot. And that record would still be on file someplace.
I would think, especially with some of the really horrible activity that's gone around cemeteries in the Chicagoland area.
Yeah.
Remember when they were like burying people on top of.
Oh yeah, that's not at all of them, but that can happen.
No, that was like on the south side.
There was a Burr Oak. It was a Burr Oak.
That's right.
That they were like double selling plots. If nobody had been in contact long enough, they figured, okay, we can just resell this one then.
I wonder what they've done legislatively to prevent that. Anyway. So.
Yeah, I mean it's always been illegal. Well, maybe it has. I know Wonder Cemetery said that they could do that after 30 years if they hadn't had any contact in 30 years at one point. That was a long time ago, though.
Interesting.
The idea that your grave is entitled to be your final resting place and that the stones are meant to last forever is really kind of new.
Fair enough.
It's a lot of these places, like at Trinity Churchyard, who knows who's even still in there, because people will be dug back up to make room for more people before too long, or they'd rot away and there's only just a couple of bones left anyway.
As long as you don't build a house on top of it, or a subdivision in California.
But people probably do.
I know.
Like one of my friends who was an archaeologist said, man, if it was like in Poltergeist, every archaeologist would be fucked.
Right?
And I mean, Lincoln Park, much of the Gold Coast, like from Schiller Avenue up to the Chicago History Museum, that was the city cemetery. And I know wild. Louise de Koven Bowen said that they found bones when they were digging out their basement, and the staff wouldn't go down there. And she herself had been to Lincoln Park when it was just being converted from the city cemetery, and thought, I am never going to this park. Yeah. There's bones lying all over, like people got up out of their graves to walk to Graceland or Rose Hill and dropped a bit along the way.
Oh my God! Oh, I have a friend who, when she found that, because she's very much about the spirituality of last resting places, sacred ground, and finding out that Lincoln Park Zoo is essentially on an old cemetery freaked her out.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did not like knowing.
Yeah, it also comes up with like Kohanim, the Jewish sect of the people who are said to be descended from Moses' brother. There's a tradition that they cannot be in contact with the dead body. They can't even like walk under a tree that has some branches that go over a cemetery. So they don't go to the zoo. And there's like records that are maintained. And whenever the History Museum brings in the bones of Jean Lalim, an early settler that they keep in off-site storage, they alert like some rabbinical group in Chicago, so people know that right now you shouldn't be, if you're Kohanim, you shouldn't be going to the History Museum.
Oh boy. Well, in Catholics, you're not supposed to separate any parts of the body from resurrection.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. It's a lot going. It's a lot of layers.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, your parts are going to get mixed up anyway, and I would think that if you're going to be rising the dead from the grave, you can move the bones back together without too much trouble.
Yeah, if this is what's happening.
But yeah, that's kind of the thing. There was a great thing written about Trinity Church. There was some newspaper thing was talking about this guy, Professor Bush, who had a theory that it was not going to be a physical resurrection on Judgment Day when the dead rose from the grave. It would be a spiritual thing. So they noted like Trinity Church had been overcrowded. There were just bodies on top of bodies. There were, by some estimates, in this place about the size of a suburban backyard, there were about 200,000 people buried. I don't think it was anywhere near that many, but even 20,000 would be a lot. And they thought, if it's to be a physical resurrection, think what a doing up there's going to be at Trinity Churchyard.
Oh, good golly, yeah.
Think how many people there would have been right there. And the Professor Bush was like a great-great-grandfather of George H.W. Bush or something.
Oh my God. So, I had no idea. All right.
Yep, so always more and more connections to find in these things. It's always strange times, but doing this kind of historical research can give you an interesting perspective on this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So everybody, we're out of time for episode 9 here.
We got Lost in Cemeteries.
Lost in Cemeteries, and Minnie Podolsky and Anna Hendricks, or Anna Hendricks' son, or however you want to spell that. I think she alternated herself back and forth between the two of them, which all of the women in the story had like 9 different names. It makes it a very interesting quirk in the puzzle and trying to research everything. But everybody, thank you very much for joining us. I'm Adam. And this has been Tube Snoopers. We'll see you next week. As always, there's lots more data, including all the stuff we've talked about today, over at patreon.com/tubesnoopers, plus early access and a whole lot more.